Hello, welcome to this cultural mobility webinar. We are so excited to have us with you today. I have to say good day, good evening, good morning, because I can see that many of the participants and the speakers are located in many parts of the world today. My name is Yohann Floch. I'm the Director of Operations at On the Move. On the Move being the international network dedicated to the circulation of artists and cultural professionals. Today, we are presenting you this webinar thanks to the support of the European Union and its Creative Europe program and the support of the French Ministry of Culture. Just in case we have participants with visual deficiencies or difficulties, I'm going to self-describe very quickly. I'm a white man in my mid-40s. I'm wearing orange reading glasses. I have facial hair and brown graying hair. I'm seated with a background, a digital white background, and a big on the move black logo. So today we are hosting this conversation thanks to Whole Round, who is web streaming the webinar. And I have my colleague Marie Le Sourd and Claire Wilson with me to help with managing all the technicalities in the background. I hope everybody is fine and well and ready to start a beautiful conversation focusing on the international circulation of indigenous creatives. Maybe before introducing my panelist, I would like to spend a second focusing on this term, indigenous, because as we know, this reality of having indigenous communities is not a shared reality. And in many countries around the globe, we have a lot of indigenous communities, and in others, we have a lack of them. And we are very jealous that we don't have somehow this knowledge and experience to have indigenous communities that are peacefully thriving in our world. I want to maybe share an element as we don't have an official definition, even at UN level. And I would like to drop a couple of elements that are shared at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Traits that we can later on discuss with our panelists, of course. Indigenous people self-identify as indigenous people at the individual level and accepted by the community as their member. There is an historical continuity with pre-colonial or pre-settler societies. There are strong links to territories and surrounding natural resources. There is a distinct social, economic, and political system, distinct language, culture, and beliefs. They form a non-dominant groups of society and resolve to maintain and reproduce their ancestral environments and systems as distinctive peoples and communities. As we understand, we use today the term indigenous people. I would like to say it's a very generic term, and we also acknowledge that in many contexts, the other terms are used: First Peoples, First Nations, Aboriginals, etc., etc. So now that I've thrown a couple of non-definition definitions, I would like to welcome my co-panelists, and I will start to present them. And of course, in the course of our conversation, they will use their lived experience and their background to be able to shed light on their international practices. So today with us we have Marta Hincapié Charry, a Colombian artist, a decolonial curator, choreographer, performer, and researcher. Marta is currently based in Berlin. She has been studying at the University of Arts at UDK Berlin, but also at the Wolfgang University Essen. under the direction of Pina Bausch. She has been awarded the very prestigious Pina Bausch Fellowship, and she's one currently of the ISPA Global Fellow, as well as the ITM Global Connector. So we are very happy to have you here. We know that your curatorial practice also encompasses being the artistic director of the Plataforma Surreal, Berlin, the Berlin Festival, that you have been also an associate curator of the Radial System in Berlin in 2021, 2022. And I will probably go back to many of these experiences later on. Today with us, we also have Anchi Lin, a visual artist from Taiwan, working in performance, moving images, cyberspace, ceramics, and kinetic installation. So you've been studying at the Taipei National University of the Arts, but also in Canada at the Simon Fraser University. You've been very active in different parts of the globe, so in Canada, in Taiwan, in Australia, in New Zealand, and you were presenting very recently at the Hawaii Triennale and at the Arts House in Australia. And I will also come back to your trajectory, talking about international mobility, of course. And then today with us, we have Lazarina Matuta. Lazarina is based in Zambia. She's a self-taught artist, exploring indigenous identity through storytelling, symbolism, and layered materials. She has been presenting work in exhibitions, but also murals, a lot of international platforms. And she's been recognized for her work with the Cynthia Zucas Young Artist Award in 2020, the FNB Visual Arts Award in 2024, and the ABSA L'Atelier in 2024 too. So welcome, my dear co-panelist. I'm very happy to actually have you here today and talk about your international experience as an Indigenous artist. And maybe this is the first question I will ask, because I could see in your respective biographies that the international dimension is either part of your educational pathway, but also of your artistic practice. And I really want to, in a way, set up the big picture and have you in a way share your international practice. Maybe we start with you, Anchi, with telling us a little bit how the international dimension came quite early on in your career.
Sure. Lokashimu. Uh, Hello, everyone. My name is Anchi, and my Atayal tribal name is Ciwas. So I go by Ciwas or Anchi. You can call me both. So thank you, Yohann, for your question. I did my undergrad in Canada. And the reason there was a trajectory for me kind of travel from Taiwan to Canada, there was a moment of me discovering my sexuality and there was like moments that maybe changing to a different country might be able to to change, like changing the environment might be a way to kind of refresh myself and also but I was very fortunate that when I got to Canada um I actually had the gender identity first when I first got into Canada, but I was very fortunate. I got into I was in the first Canadian First Nation host family who were hosting me. So I was staying with them, and that was the time I developed my how do you say my Indigenous identity awareness. This is something I wasn't really looking into when I was living in Taiwan because within my mother's generation, that was the time this identity is not very easy to be visible. And so, and the fact being in Canada, during my undergrad, that was very impactful for me because I see the celebration of, like the being First Nation and then revealing the history and stories that's being so hidden for so many generations. And that's kind of like my journey of becoming aware who I am and really solidify that my ethnic background and also uh also engaging with local First Nation um community, kind of talking about gender and and sexuality in the context of First Nation worldview, that really, really helped me to get to yeah, just really solidify who I am, and I feel that support from being in Canada that really gave me the courage later on when I finished my undergrad and I moved back to Taiwan. I really feel secure and feel like being supported, that I can advocate like who I am, and also being queer and also being as Indigenous person. Yeah,
It,
so that's
it
kind of like,
Yeah, it is
yeah.
very interesting that the journey, I mean, the physical journey also helped reveal, in a way, a part of you that was somehow um, underground. And I like when preparing this conversation, I was reading that you used the term urban indigenous to actually summarize the experience of being an urban indigenous and suddenly being able to go back to Taiwan and explore the full indigenous identity, including by learning the Atayal language and fully embracing that part of you.
Totally, fully. Like, I think the major reason I moved back from Canada back to Taiwan is to relearn the language, the Atayal language. But I think the idea of like re-indigenizing myself as an urban indigenous, I think that's really, really changing. That's kind of like self-decolonization of my perspective from what I have been educated in the mainstream education system in Taiwan and also within Canada too. Like I go through the major the big university there, but then when I was engaging with the local indigenous people, I also gain really different perspectives. So I have to be really aware of like what perspective am I learning. But that's really good for me to have that back and forth like like self how do you say critical worldview. I think that's really important to put me where I position and situate.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. I'm sure, I mean, I have a million questions, and I'm sure the participants will also have. Don't be frustrated. We will take the time after this conversation to take questions and comments, and either you will be able, of course, to post them in the chat, but also to take the floor and ask your questions to the panelists, but also share your experience yourself. Marta, I think I'm going towards you because I feel that what Anchi just shared could resonate with your own trajectory, especially because in your practice you are focusing a lot on decolonization. Could you elaborate a little bit on this international trajectory and particularly your research in terms of decolonial practices?
Yeah, thank you. Yohann, yeah, actually it resonates a lot with my own path. I was born and raised in Colombia, and I wanted to become a dancer, a professional dancer. In that time, like Colombia is a country that we have been living from one crisis to the other, like with many critical moments. And in that time, it was also very, very, very hard time in Colombia, very violent, beyond violent. And there was no invest in the arts, let's say. So there was no like a professional program to become a dancer. That was like something that was not in the panorama at all. So I started to look for opportunities to go abroad. It was also very difficult for us at the moment. And I wanted to study with Pina, to dance with Pina, and then things happened and I landed in Essen, Germany from Colombia. And yeah, I began like all these professional studies process in a modern contemporary dance theater. And also when I finished and the studies, I started to work with many choreographers and companies. And I also wanted to become a choreographer, and I decided to move to Berlin. And in this process, my grandmother from my mother's side passed. And my grandmother was like kind of the last link we had to our indigenous lineage. Like my grandmother was the one that was sharing with us, talking about it, like making it present. And we all were busy, like trying to whitewashing ourselves and to cope with what Occidental culture, no, that is supposed what we have to become or we have to be if we want to be good or successful or to have opportunities in life. And then when my grandmother passed, that hit me like really hard. And after having all these amazing opportunities, like dancing with Pina, with the Berliner Philharmonica, working with Bob Wilson, I had to stop and to decide, okay, I have to reset somehow what I'm doing and go back, to the roots, to the memory, to the thing is like the lineage where I come from, that is the Quimbaya lineage. In Colombia is nowadays considered officially extinct. So I don't have like a territory, like the territory is colonized, changed, like there is no like a community where I can really go back to meet the elders and I can get to know more about my culture from books or going to a museum, for instance. So I was very disoriented. And I also decided like, okay, I'm gonna try to get kind of adopted by a community. To me in that moment was like something impossible, but it is something that just came up to me, and I started to make to open up communication with different leaders, communities, and then things just started to happen in ways that I never could imagine. And doors started to open, and I was received from many different communities from the Abya or the so-called Americas in a way so familiar and generous and welcoming, taking part in ceremonies and spending time in the communities with the elders, in Brazil, in Mexico, in Colombia, or even in Long Island, in the US. And I start all this long path of remembering that is not learning, but maybe more like unlearning and remembering what it means to be an indigenous person in many urban context. And well, so yeah, this is like a kind of introduction, and the way that I've been connecting, reconnecting, grounding, and doing all the decolonial work that starts between ourselves. And it's it's a lot of inner work to do first, and it's kind of never ending. So yeah, I'm still on it. Yeah.
No,
Tell me, Johann.
it's fascinating the to go back to roots, and that the international dimension is comes, I would say, for you both quite early on. I mean, for obvious reasons of education, in work opportunities, artistic growth. I mean, the international dimension come with all these motivations, maybe, and at the same time, the international dimension comes to reveal something about the roots. And I find it fascinating how, I mean, for both of you, I think you draw in this personal journey, but also this international journey, a lot of knowledge that fuel your artistic practice and your creation. And maybe this is something that Lazarina is also very familiar with. The notion of lineage, the notion of being part of a context where, I mean, in Zambia, there are 72 cultures, tribes, languages. It's a very rich country. And I guess you are, in a way, also artistically using, reinterpreting, digesting the many stories that the different tribes in Zambia are, in a way, passing and in a way transmitting throughout time. Could you tell us a little bit if these two stories resonate with yours in terms of how sits the international dimension in this personal journey?
Thank you so much, Yohann. Apologies. I think their stories do absolutely resonate with me because I grew up in an environment where, especially academically, when you're in school, you're being taught about people that are related to your history, but not directly influence, like, your story. So I'm in school and I'm learning about David Livingstone and like missionaries and stuff like that, when there is still like a deeper, richer history that I should be learning from. So like you said, Yohann, there are 72 tribes. 72 is a large number. And for me, an artist that creates from indigenous culture and identity, you can imagine that for me, it's amazing. It's like so many avenues to draw inspiration from. However, on the flip side, there is the pressure to represent your culture authentically because there's 72. I'm only part of one or two tribes because I have two parents that are from two different tribes. So there are 72 tribes. And while you're telling this story, when you're given an opportunity like this, like the opportunity I have now, I have the pressure of representing our culture authentically. And there is the responsibility to go beyond just aesthetics. Like, how beautiful is your work? How lovely the symbolism, blah, blah, blah. You have the responsibility beyond that to communicate with people who have no idea about where you come from, people that have no idea about my country. My country is Zambia. So, I think in my indigenous art practice, there are those hurdles, but at the same time, there is like the excitement of being able to share this journey, this experience, my culture with the rest of the world.
Thank you. No, that's also something that we can also touch upon, because when you are in a way reflecting on the positioning of the artist, with a particular background, and in particular this indigenous background, there is an understanding that the invitations that could land on your desk, the work opportunities, residencies opportunities, etc., are somehow intrinsically connected to the indigenous identity that you are investigating artistically. And this leads me to the question of the representation, but also the misrepresentation, the tokenism that an artist can maybe, encounter during this artistic journey, especially at international level. And I would like you three to maybe share your experiences in this, the representation, misrepresentation, or tokenism that can happen at international level when invited in presenting work in a fair or in, you know, a museum, in presenting work in galleries, but also how you are approached in these international circles. I don't know. Do you want to elaborate on this? Maybe I don't know, Lazarina. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I could start, no problem. I think what you're asking is about my mobility journey.
Yeah.
Just to confirm. Okay, cool. So, I've only been to one residency so far, and that is in Johannesburg, South Africa. That was last year. So, from when I started professionally in 2017, I've only been to one sort of residency. I don't know if I can call it a residency, to be honest. It was a week. I was in a space with like different artists from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Botswana. So it was a large group of artists in one space in Johannesburg. And I mean, it was, for me personally, it was, I think, eye-opening because quite all right. It was very close to home, right? Johannesburg, Lusaka, very close. I can't really sit here and tell you, oh, I've traveled like, overseas. But that one particular experience, even though it was close to home, was so important for me because it was transformative. I had the time and the space, to reflect on my own cultural grounding. I had time to connect with artists from East, West, North, Southern Africa, and it was very helpful. So sometimes that's all it takes, to be honest. Like, you're expecting someone to say, oh, I traveled to this place and this place and I got this, that. But for me, that one, residency really opened like my mind to so many different opportunities. I got to learn from different artists where they come from. I got to share my own, journey where I come from. And so for me, that was very, very important and very big.
And during this exchange and
Yes.
residency, at the conversation with other artists,
Yeah.
were you a Zambian? Were you an indigenous artist? I mean,
I
what kind of label, or if
yeah.
any, if
Yeah.
any, really,
Okay.
you were?
So I think what I loved the most about this residency, for starters, is that it was tailored to African artists. So the Absa Latilia is actually tailored to African artists, which is a very rare experience for me as a Zambian artist because not so many opportunities are tailored to me. And so when I came across that particular, open call, I was very excited because I said, oh, okay, look, I have a better chance to get into this program because it actually specifically says it's more for African artists. Because quite often in my journey as an artist and my applications, I do find applications, I'm very interested and I'm like, okay, cool. Let me try this. But then I go down to the requirements and it's like, oh, sub-Saharan Africa, Zambia, not really part of it. So I'm like, oh my God, I had such a wonderful presentation for that. I was so excited. But then you find oftentimes that you're not included in the, list. So for the Absolutely, I was very excited. I was very honored to be part of it. I learned a lot. And uh, yeah, I think it was a very transformative experience for
Yeah.
me personally.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing this. I think you dropping a very interesting also keywords, I mean trigger word for me, which are the exclusion, inclusion, the
Yeah,
idea
yeah,
that
exactly.
suddenly a door is open but
Exactly.
is not really open for you. We are expecting somebody else, etc. Which is, I think, probably an experience that many indigenous artists have gone through. And the idea of this is not for me, or this international pathway is not for me. I'm wondering, it's one of the questions that I have for you and for all the participants. But in terms of representation, Marta, you being a curator, you are also presenting others people's work. I mean, as part of your own artistic practice, you are selecting artistic work, you are in exchange or even commissioning probably some work. So I was wondering, how do you approach the representation or misrepresentation of indigenous work?
Yeah. Well, actually, I am a self-made curator because when I arrived to Berlin, I realized that even though Berlin is a city that is self-presented as inclusive and diverse, with everything is happening and everything is possible, I realized that there were actually no spaces for us, like we were invisibilized and yeah, we just didn't have the opportunity to be present in the art scene. It's been changing lately in the last couple of years, where indigenous works and artists have been becoming more and more interest and more spaces and windows to share works. But my festival is this year we're gonna celebrate the 12th edition. And then yeah, I started just from scratch to open up spaces to put artists from the focus on artists from the Atayal, also with indigenous focus, also with the focus in the Amazonia rainforest, for instance. I think I'm frozen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can hear you.
Okay. and and then I've been also realizing also in my experience as an artist, as a curator, as an artist taking representation, the representation question, how we are not part of the power structures, no, of the structures where decisions are made and where of the spaces or venues or festivals or the programs where we are invited, like we don't have really a person, usually, most of the time, like a person where we can have a conversation about where we come from. There is where is part of the conversation, the ritualization that we need also when we arrive into a new place to go and greet the territory, or maybe to realize a ceremony, private or public, and maybe we need some. Last year we were on a gathering where we were with Australian indigenous artists, and we wanted to do a fire ceremony, and there was a need to have like eucalyptus branches, for instance, like little details that are not part of the conversation when you are invited to a place as an indigenous artist. So yeah, to me it's been really important to make it personal and to have to develop a bond with the artist, a conversation, not just to invite it, you come and then you leave and this is over. But how can we develop the conversation to develop a relationship that is not just mediated by resources or by funding or by trends in the programming trends, European programming trends, but also how can we develop and construct and make a strong relationship in time, and how can we maybe not just take a work and present it and let it go, but how to keep the conversation and how to bring the focus through the years into these artists with different possibilities, maybe a publication, maybe an interview, maybe to include the artist also in the programming conversation. I don't know, to open different dialogue and relationship possibilities, also through time and also through getting to know the needs, the very special needs of artists from the global majority, from indigenous, as you said at the beginning, is a very generic term.
Mm-hmm.
And also in Colombia, we have more than 100 indigenous communities and languages,
Mm-hmm.
and each community is very particular and very special.
Mm-hmm.
And this is important also to address, no, and to acknowledge and to be mindful about it. Yeah.
Yes, and this leads me to my next question for you, actually, inspired by what you say. I was wondering if, since you navigated a lot of these international waters, or you were in many countries in South or Latin America, but also in Europe,
Yeah.
you potentially probably presented work really connected to your own indigenous culture. And I was
Mhm.
wondering if you could observe differences between the reception of your artistic work in Berlin or in Europe and in the so-called Americas, the idea that the audience enjoy, appreciate, access your artistic work very differently because they have a different knowledge also of the indigenous realities.
Right. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Actually, yes. The reactions and the reception change a lot, depending of the spaces, but also from the background of the people, that comes to be part of the experience of the works, to share that moment with me. I'm also very grateful when people show up. And I try, I like, I work in opening up reflection spaces for the people that come and join me. And I always make it quite immersive, where people are not just spectators with a distance, but I try to make them somehow part of the performance or of the moment that we are sharing together. And this allows people to become closer and to kind of dissolve this barrier that can be present sometimes when indigenous works are presented. And generally, people get very touched and moved and grounded and connected with the topics that I'm sharing about. Sometimes there are also, I have to say, very few that approach it in a very rational way, like more, I wouldn't say academic, but very theoretical. And then the conversation changes, and which I think is also very important to have this kind of conversations. And I try to get involved also in this kind of reflections, when the topic of indigenous artists and works and needs and messages get approached from a more structural way, where of course there are also a lot of bias and structural racism, no, and where our bodies are racialized and yeah, and then you have to kind of have like a hard skin, like a thick skin, no, sometimes to have some kind of conversations, and I try to have them also with a lot of understanding and trying to bring the conversation on a ground where we can understand each other at some point, hopefully.
Of course, of
But
course.
yeah, it can be challenging. It can be challenging sometimes. Also, when it can be sometimes kind of confused with spirituality or spiritualism or new wave, or I got also that sometimes like people try to bring or to understand the work with from not spiritual but yeah, kind of new wave approach. And I think this conversation is also important to have because it has to do also with the spiritual extractivism and how it can get like also misunderstood sometimes. I don't know if I'm clear with what I'm
No,
saying.
no, that's
Yeah.
very interesting because
Okay.
it's um, in a way you touch upon an interesting issue, which is the how the work of indigenous artists is perceived
Yeah.
and the gap between one's knowledge about the realities of first of all indigenous knowledge, indigenous communities, etc. So this really
Mm-hmm.
basic gap of knowledge between an audience member or somebody from another country to the
Mm-hmm.
realities, the stories, the background. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess what you are describing is very interesting because this, how do we fill the gaps? And I find it very
Mm-hmm.
powerful that you, as an artist, you are ready for the hard conversations and you are
Mm-hmm.
ready also to, to say, well, if we are in this situation or in this configuration of having different indigenous communities, languages, etc., is also because we have colonial past,
Mm-hmm.
settlements, and very difficult stories behind
Mm-hmm.
the today's realities. So
Right.
it is an interesting take in a way on the perceptions of the artistic work. Maybe I will turn now
Mm-hmm.
to Anchi because I feel this international journey of yours have also brought you um, in a way some distance or some distance towards different realities. I mean, you are today based in the Pacific, quite far away from Canada. You are far away also somehow from Taiwan, even if I know you are commuting if we can use that term.
Yeah, I'm currently in Southern Hemisphere. I'm in
Yeah.
Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah.
Just here last year, but I'm still back and forth, Taiwan and Australia. So going back to your question about misinterpretation and
Yeah. Yeah.
representation, I think first thing I feel very privileged is to be able to speak English because coming from non-English speaking country, we mainly speak Mandarin. So I feel having English is a tool for me to be visible in the international stage. I have to acknowledge this. But at the same time, traveling and doing shows overseas, I often tell myself I need to be careful not to create the work that's spectacle just to fit the foreigners, the gaze,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I need to also be responsible to what I represent. I mean, first, I need to be who I am first to be a dial person. So that's kind of like my take to like as my journey. I try to accept myself, my sexuality, my gender, and that's my practice is about and reconnecting back to my people. I realize this is something I can my people already have a worldview and a place, a sense of belonging for me being as a queer person that already that I don't need to try to identify myself in the Western world. So I just need to keep reinforcing that. But the way I keep getting this, the way I sustain this is through the language because with the language I realize the worldview is coming back to me because it's kind of like I see language as technology and as like an algorithm as worldview, like I have to keep getting this language back to my physical system, my mind to create my work. So when I do my work, I avoid traditional patterns,
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
I always integrate intangible worldview in my work. So that's kind of like my take how I work with representation. I feel like our worldview is the representation. I don't want to just copy all these traditional patterns, but I know these patterns also has meaning, but I want something that's coming from my life, my journey, to form that aesthetics, to form that that work. So I think that's as an artist, that's our job to recreate that dialogue. And in the contemporary time, especially in this colonial system and globalized system, we need to be, yeah, that I think our work is kind of in that kind of role to engage with this kind of conversation. And our elders give me, because as an urban indigenous, I often feel, where's my belonging? How can I represent? Like I just feel very inspired from my elders. They say, family, as long as we share in one pot, we are family. So what that means is, if we work together, we are in a community. Eating together, we are family. So that's something I feel very drawn and feel very inspired, that I just need to keep engaging with my community people and being who I am. And I can be Atayal. Yeah. So not just the pattern, like the old pattern. They want me to make new pattern. I think that's what they mean.
But I love how you describe the hyper local or a small unit in a way. I mean, the community unit, and then how the global sphere inform that unit and the other way around. How this small unit, in a way, inform the perception also of the global scale. And it feels, when listening to you, that this international dimension, so traveling, presenting work in different contexts, creating work from, using all your pieces of your identity, help also grow artistically. So this international dimension forge, in a way, a new pathway that maybe wouldn't have been born or maintained and developed if it was only at a local level, in a small scale.
And I just want to add one more thing, the other
Yeah.
way around. Having shows overseas also empower me to have dialogue locally in Taiwan. So I think it goes both ways for me. Like I've been feeling a lot that the international shows, it doesn't matter if it's just like now, wherever it is, like it really helped me to gain momentum locally, and then so it goes both way to me.
Yeah. No, that's very clear. Maybe I have a last question because I see the time, and I'm expecting to have questions and reactions from our online participants. Is there still an appetite to work internationally for you, for each of you? And what is missing for you to be able to embrace more even international opportunities? So the appetite is there, yes or no? And what's missing for you to be able to embrace that international trajectory? Who wants to start? Should we continue with you, Anchi, maybe?
I need a little bit more time.
Okay, that's good. Who wants to go? Lazarina, maybe? Yes, you go. Oh, you are muted. You are muted.
Okay, fantastic. If I have understood your question 100%, you're asking what could be done to push or help Indigenous artists. Is that what you're
To go
asking?
international. I mean, if they
Yes.
have an appetite to go
Yeah,
international, but
yeah.
what would be the best support for them?
Okay, so in my case, in the Zambian case, of course, I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm speaking for myself because my lived experience is not the same. But in my case, what I've found is the application process is a bit like complicated in terms of language barriers, like visa restrictions, even the timeline itself, I feel like is, structured towards the Western timeline, the Western artists. So it does get a bit difficult for me. Of course, the onus is not upon external bodies, to bring our art forward. The onus is on us, the Zambian artists, the Zambian bodies, to create this dialogue between local artists and international artists, because I think the best exchange is where both sides transform, not just observe. So if I go to a residency or anything to do with, my career, my line of work, I expect to bring something home that I can share with the people at home. So I think what can be done, just like on a grassroots level, is to make the applications, maybe for me, maybe I'm just not like tech savvy enough, but the applications do tend to be like a bit cumbersome. And then also for a low income country like mine, Zambia, if I'm looking at an application fee and it's quoted in dollars and I have to do like, the currency conversion, it does become very expensive for me. So if I'm trying to get into different, sorts of programs, it is expensive for me to have to pay for that. There are some, of course, that are free. There are funds that are there. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys that we don't have funding. We do. What I just not so many options, because the problem I encounter as an artist, if I go back to the earlier time in my career, I had to collaborate with fellow young artists when I was starting out, because as a solo artist, it was very daunting. I wasn't able to, step up to the occasion and say, hey, this is what I have to offer, this is what I can do. But as a collective, we were able to sort of apply for funding. And it's also not funding that was readily available. We had to create that opportunity to say, hey, we have this project. If you're able to fund us, that would be great. And luckily, we had those organizations that were able to help us. So I think if the process could be easier, it would be better for me. I wouldn't say I'm an upcoming artist anymore. I've had a bit more experience. So I know the things that work for my path as a career and the things that don't. But for an upcoming artist that's figuring out the way, it may be difficult to, even the requirements, sometimes a bit like too much, like you have to have done this, you have to have experienced this sort of thing. So that's heavy for an upcoming artist. So I think maybe the application process could be made a bit easier. But then again, the onus doesn't just lie on the funding, organizations. It lies on the artists as well, because if I'm funding you, I should be able to believe or know that you're going to be able to carry out this project. So I think it works both ways. The funding organizations, the bodies, and also the artists have to be in a position where if I produce my portfolio, I can tell you, hey, I've done this, that. And if I apply for this fund, that your money is not going to go to waste. So I think it's a push and pull sort of. Yeah.
I mean, it's the administrative burden of it, or the management of it, but also the trust aspect, because there is, for funders, donors, etc., the idea of trusting the beneficiaries to be able to carry their project. And we know with international funding or supporting the young and emerging, etc., this trust issue is an issue for many of them.
Yes.
I'm giving the floor to Marta for the same question. Is there an appetite? And if so, how can we better support the international trajectory?
Well, more than an appetite, I think that's the dynamic of my work as between international exchanges and collaborations. That's what I do, and I like tending bridges between the continents and between cultures and between different gazes and perspectives. So that's kind too organic to me somehow.
Mhm.
For sure, I agree with Lazarina. Like, we cannot take for granted that all Indigenous artists speak English, for instance,
Mm.
or that all Indigenous artists have a PayPal to pay for an application fee, even if it's just $10. If you make the change and you look at the different cultures and geopolitical realities, it's not like it's something that make things accessible. That I don't. Many processes are not inclusive for sure,
Mhm.
and they are of course exclusive. No, like promoting
Mhm.
exclusion, and I think that this also has to do with what I spoke before, like when in the power structures in these all, especially Central European
Mhm.
cultural structures, when representation is not just a performative thing that is in a program and comes and goes, but it's not inside the infrastructures, the structures itself, then there's going to be always a lack of empathy in those regards, no, in those
Mhm.
little
Mhm.
details that make a huge difference for
Mhm.
us. And also the dialogue can be open in a different level of reflection and of opening up possibilities and also processes, no,
Mm.
to that are beyond just one invitation or one visa process. For instance, for our visas are, even though I'm living in Europe and I have a Schengen visa, for example, the UK make valid on last year in December 24, like for Christmas presents for Colombians, we need a visa again to enter the UK. So I think it's a forward and back, like all these processes are
Mhm.
like a
Mhm.
dance, no, like one step forward, two
Mhm.
steps back,
Yeah.
and we are all the time like trying to keep the rhythm and not to step each other on the feet.
No, for
But
sure.
I think, yeah,
But
mm,
the visa issue is, I think,
yeah,
is a point that comes very often in
right.
our discussion on the international circulation of artists, for sure. But you drop a word that I feel might resonate with many people is the word empathy, and how
Hmm.
as the gatekeepers,
Hmm.
working in institutions, the gatekeepers that are donors or funders, develop new pathways for empathy in our
Hmm.
field. And I guess the
Hmm.
news and the constant flows of bad news and terrible information is a stress test also for all our structures in terms of
Sure.
how we build answers that are grounded in empathy. Maybe, Anchi, I finish with you this round around appetite and
Now I have some ideas.
yes.
So I think the most the I think the artist fee thing can, if the institution can be paid up front, would be tremendous, amazing for me, because a lot of time doing international show I have to pay up front for a lot of things, and I end up like really in a difficult financial stress. And so I think if the institution can do that, I think it would be really stress relief. Um, but also, another thing I was thinking that like application, it's mostly accessible in English. So for non-English Indigenous arts practitioners, it might be a bit difficult to
Mhm,
reach
mhm,
that realm. And I think another thing is the continuous relationship that building with artists, because feel like sometimes when I finish one show, it's like never continue the dialogue. I think that that long-term relationship can be quite valuable for I think both institutional artists to build dialogue and growth
mhm,
together.
mhm.
Yeah, so that's what I have so far. And also like there's more, but I think that's all I have. So
No, but thank you. Thank you. What also I take away from your three answers, your respective answers, is that there is apart from language barrier, that is a real massive issue, I would say, for indigenous artists, creatives, and communities. You don't always, I mean, you don't identify barriers, obstacles, or impediments that are specific to indigenous artists and communities, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it will come later on. Look, it's time maybe to open the floor to the participants. You can, as my colleagues Marie-Le Sour and Claire have mentioned, in the chat, you can post your questions, but you can also raise your digital hand. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand so I can see. I will open my
Just
screen.
Yohann, one question. I didn't get your last phrase. Like we didn't.
I
Like what
mean,
you said.
sorry. Wait, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, I
Thank you.
meant that in terms of impediments or obstacles, the obstacles and impediments that you mentioned, maybe the visa issue, maybe access to funding or opportunities, administrative burden, application processes, they are in a way the reality of many, many artists that are outside of the Western European context, to put it very bluntly. So if you're based in Senegal, if you're based in Vietnam, if you're based in Georgia, if you're based in Chile, you might encounter the difficulties that you have raised collectively. And maybe apart from the language issue, that is an issue that is probably very specific to some groups, not everybody. But I felt that they are not impediments or obstacles that are specific to the indigenous artists or the indigenous communities. They are shared with the broader, artistic community, access to funding, visa, etc. But maybe you have another take on this. Don't hesitate to share if you feel there are some specific impediments or obstacles. You can of course share them with us. I let you think, and I open the floor. If participants are willing to take the floor, just let me know. I think our researcher Manona Yeluchi is online and ready to ask a first question. Maybe Manu? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Yohann. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful. I am sitting outside, so you never know. A very quick note of thanks to all of our speakers today. I think you have contributed to, honestly, a conversation that I think really needs a lot more attention. And I think it really points to something that will actually translate into my first question, hopefully a question that kicks things off. I think all three of you in some way or the other pointed out the fact that in the power structures that be, and Martha, I think this is something that you specifically mentioned when you were talking about curation. In the power structures that be, there's sometimes a lack of representation, and then that translates, I think, into policies, different kinds of restrictions. And I wonder, and perhaps that ties into Johann's last sort of point as well, sort of how we can differentiate some of the problems that maybe other artists experience from the global majority, more specifically to artists who are indigenous, creating indigenous work. So to simplify, my question is, sorry, I tend to ramble, but my question is, how do you see us encouraging more participation from the indigenous arts communities in the power structures, whether that's curation or funding? And yeah, I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Manu. That's a great question. I don't know if Marta, you have your hands up. Do you want to answer this?
Yeah, yes, sure. Thank you for your question. It helps me to elaborate also on Johann's question. I I think that well, just of course, when we just spoke about representation in power structures, especially in Central Europe, that has a huge responsibility or the responsibility in colonization on a planetary level, and like colonization is been like even official by the IPCC report that is also the cause of climate change. So, of course, climate change is a huge issue that brings us all together, and the responsibility on the all the climate change impacts and the way that cultural structures and cultural workers address it is intrinsic related to colonialism, and that is where indigenous artists come out. And as you know, indigenous communities, even though we are kind of 5-7% of the population, like officially, not as like official numbers. Indigenous communities are taking care and are the guardians of around 70-80% of nature in the planet. So the relationship with nature that indigenous artists bring with them in their bodies, in their relationships, in their works, are like vital nowadays for our relationship to nature. And not just for us as a community or in our ceremonial spaces or in our relationship to the artistic work in the studio, but this is related to all humanity and the survival of humanity and the future of humanity. We have been dealing with what Western cultures are dealing nowadays. We have been dealing for more than 500 years. So we have been living in struggle, in crisis, confronting issues like genocide, like my culture experienced it. So the way we address all these topics and the way we share them with with wherever we are and with the opportunities we have and the people that are coming to be with us in a fleeting moment, I think that are nowadays more relevant than ever. And that's why indigenous works and indigenous artists cannot be another trend in the European cultural ecosystem. I think uh, the reflection and the spaces and the opportunities have to be more they need more investment for sure. And this is what I wanted to say, just to make it a little bit more existential. But I think it really has to be nowadays, if we see the news, what is happening, even well, I don't want to go into any specific topic because then another portal is open and we don't have the time to talk about it. But I think yeah, it's just a need in many different levels. No, we are not just doing a show and going away. We are doing a work, a collective work. Yeah.
I'm wondering if Lazarina or Anchi, you want to answer that question too?
I just thought of something that
Yes.
isn't completely related to the question. Also kind of thinking back of like institution and being like indigenous artist. I think this is something I recently feel very in a kind of predicament, like because of the Taiwan has been quite isolated by the international communities like UN and all that stuff. And so with that reality, our government really trying to make our art as visible as possible. And so a lot of time, Indigenous artists will get picked for maybe going to certain shows. But I think that that process becomes like a token quite quite strongly. And sometimes I could feel that the institution from overseas, they probably would think they would get the money from our government, so they pick our artists, but not really. I don't know if how much they want to engage with us. So for me, I'm very aware, like I really need to see like the institution want to engage with my art. So I would say yes. But if it's for that kind of cultural diplomacy, I would be like, this is just using me. So this is something I would just came across my head and I thought would be, it's really nuanced, but I think it's really important to bring it up for as an artist who've been
No,
showing work.
that's
Yeah.
a very interesting input also because from experience and researching the reality of the different indigenous artistic circumstances or context, it's very rare that the cultural diplomacy, so the powerful structures are promoting indigenous work in that context. They might support the arts, etc., but it's quite rare actually that a diplomatic body will support the voice of indigenous artists internationally as to represent the main majority culture of the country.
So
So maybe we have time for another question, and I can see one that was posted in the chat, but I don't know if Anuraj Rajendran wanted to take the floor and ask the question. Otherwise, of course, I can read it. Anurai, are you ready to take the floor? Yes, you're here. Hello, welcome.
Yeah, hi. The question is the same. How does one embrace the indigenous practice without compromising or extending the practices? Especially like mostly what we represent that may not come back to the indigenous community sometimes. Like whatever the privilege or the opportunity we get from representing to a certain platform or certain stage that may not come back to the community where we actually originate from. So I'm kind of trying to understand this aspect. If Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anuraj. Anybody from the panel who would like to react or comment on this?
Yeah.
Wait a second, Yannick.
You mean, sorry, if just to know if I got, sorry, Lazarina, you want to speak? You will mute.
I was trying to understand the question, so I'm not sure if I have. So you can go ahead, Marta.
No, I also wanted to know if you Anuraj, sorry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing well, if you are talking about like reciprocity with the communities, or just to know if I got it right?
Yes, as a kind of a reciprocity with the community, and because mostly the practice is what we are trying to bring out of the community, or an opportunity we get it from somewhere, we represent and we leave it there. We don't bring back a certain opportunity for the community itself, not going back to the roots, if that makes sense. So how we can embrace and make validity for the practices, if that makes sense.
I think so. I can try. Or Lazarina, you wanna go?
No, no.
No, I
can.
don't.
Okay.
You can go. It's okay.
I can try to answer. Yeah, of course, and indigenous communities and way of life, like reciprocity, is one of the main aspects where relationships are not extractive, but are like it's always in a flow of taking and giving, and of course, like contributing to the communities. Is part of the everyday life, and I go every year as long as I can to the Abya to the Americas, and I spend the most time I can also with the communities, with the elders that are also friends, and I do a lot of community work that is not public, that is not part also of my artistic work, and it's also not in my social media, but it's just part of the relationship that we have. And also, I will say, like, not everything is transactional, and not that, like, all the contributions you do have to be are in a capitalistic way, so to say, or a material way. Like ceremonies and offerings are also part of it. Like my work is not like one-to-one, like reproducing what happens in a, for instance, in a community ritual, but they are mediated by my own biographical and my artistic perspective. But also I retribute a lot with in a ritualistic way, and also making offerings to nature and to situations in nature that can be critical at the moment, or where in the territory where I'm visiting and where I'm presenting my work. And so there are many levels of contribution that yeah that I need also to invest your time and your energy and your sometimes also money, of course, your personal money that is not paid by the project, but you have to make that investment. But I don't know if that answers the question.
I mean, I guess you provided a beautiful answer also to elaborate on the non-transactional or outside capitalistic material financial approaches, and how you grow a community that is also based on human relation and not just contracts and
Right.
and flows of cash or whatever.
Right.
I'm aware that we have two other participants who would like to ask questions. So maybe I will ask Yannick to take the floor first. Yannick Kitoko, I hope your internet is good. Yes, Yannick, you are muted. Can you unmute?
Okay. Thank morning for all.
Your internet is very bad. We don't hear you very well, Yannick. Maybe what we could do is ask you to write the question or your comment in the chat, and I will read it because your sound is very, very bad. I'm very sorry. I'll let you write it in the chat. Maybe I give the floor to Anne. Anne Abatuhai, can you hear me? Yes, you can unmute and take the floor.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I wanted to ask, I think the speakers and maybe also everyone who's present today, I'm working on a project right now. It's a rather ambitious project that unites Brazil and Australia and Norway and Canada, with presenting organizations and festivals in those countries, and we are trying to create a kind of global platform for Indigenous artists. And it's sort of a pilot program right now, so it's very small. So we're testing it out between these 4 countries, looking for funding, and the idea is to have kind of exchange residencies between Indigenous artists of these 4 countries. They would come and stay for a certain amount of time in one of these countries, meet the Indigenous artistic community in that area, collaborate, exchange, talk, and kind of explore also curatorial practice and maybe collaborate. I mean, whatever. And the idea is that we sort of create these exchange opportunities for Indigenous artists who don't really have these same opportunities like other artist groups have. Like I'm working on a different project where we create this kind of exchange residency between emerging artists in Europe. So, there are programs that exist, but not specifically for Indigenous artists. And we're still figuring it out. We have an advisory board of Indigenous artists who are leading the project, and it's very interesting. One of them is a man named Dylan Robinson, who wrote a book called Hungry Listening, which I know was read a little bit, quite a bit in the contemporary music circles, and who talks about breaking down a kind of colonial settler way of listening and bringing in Indigenous ways of sitting, listening, relating to objects. It's a fantastic book, which I recommend to absolutely everyone. So it's really breaking down everything about the artistic experience, the performance and the reception. So what I want to know is, for us, this is really, we're like walking forward in the dark because we're creating it with them. And of course, they're leading. And so we're all trying to figure out where this should go and what the best way to do it is. And of course, looking for funding, which is always a challenge. But I heard recently from our Brazilian partner that someone had told him that this type of exchange between Indigenous artists from different countries is not a new thing, that it exists, which surprised me because I've been looking for initiatives like this to sort of compare and see. I've seen things in the UN. It's more of a political gathering, a cultural gathering, but not something that's specifically for artists. So my question to everyone here actually is, do you know of these any initiative like this? And maybe specifically to our speakers who are personally invested maybe in this question a little more than everybody else. Yeah, does this exist? Do you know of anything that's similar? Yeah, and also welcome to hear anybody's ideas or thoughts on the actual project if you want to share that too.
Yes, thank you, Anne. I think some people want to know the book. So if you can post in the chat the name and the title of the book, I think we will have many readers. I don't know if my panelists want to react or do they have knowledge of such exchange program that exists? Yes, Marta?
Thank you, Anne. I wanted to know if Yannick maybe could write the question because the sound we couldn't hear you very well. If it's okay with you, Yannick. And to answer to Anne or Anne, I'm not sure. I know initiatives and I'm part of such initiatives, but we are like invisible networks, like we are not official networks, we are not funded, and we are like emotional support networks or exchange networks between artist curators and cultural managers that we come together and we support each other and we exchange experiences, knowledge, or we are just present supporting each other in different situations, but we are not like organizations, like official, maybe we haven't find the time to do the work that such structures implies, but I have to say that we work very good together and we try as often as we can to have a dialogue and to exchange and to contribute to each other but it has to do, it had also a lot to do with, I don't know, in Spanish we say afectos, that is something that affects you in an emotional way, that this bond that you create with people, of course, because also we share the performing arts ecosystems, but yeah, I know some, but we are not like, we don't have a website maybe, or it's more like a human bonds and human change and humans.
But it's also, I feel, I mean, Marta, what you are describing, this idea of informality is also very organic,
Yeah.
and sometimes like the website is not the always the, I mean, it's a it's a very
Right.
particular Western tool
Yeah, I know.
also. I mean, I don't want to,
Yeah.
open.
I know, yeah, but I have to say that I couldn't make it without these invisible networks. Like to me, they are like basic, yeah, to do what I do. Yeah.
And just a
Okay.
question, sorry about that that network. It's other artists, right? There aren't institutions also involved. There aren't artistic outcomes
Not
that are
really
produced.
institutions, yeah, like artists or curators or cultural workers, but not it's not institutionalized, so to say. No. It will be nice, maybe,
Okay.
but not yet.
Thank you. And thank you for all your questions. I mean, Anne, of course, but also, I mean, Yannick, we are very sorry we couldn't catch your question or your comment. And I also want to thank Anurai for his questions. Look, we reached that moment already. That felt a bit short, but we reached that moment where we have to close this webinar. I really want to thank our three panelists, Anchi, Marta, and Lazarina. But I also want to thank our captioners that were providing subtitles live to everything we said. So thank you very much for this. I'm thanking, of course, Claire and Marie as part of the team of On the Move, and VJ from All Round, who assisted for the streaming of this webinar. Of course, you can follow On the Move News. Of course, you will find a lot of open calls on our website to embrace residencies, work opportunities, learning opportunities internationally. And on our website, you will not find these opportunities where you need to pay to access them or to apply. We have a quite strict editorial policy. You will find, I mean, we also encourage you to subscribe to our newsletters, at least to receive these opportunities. And I feel from the conversation, I feel it's needed that the information is circulated broadly. And then we kindly ask you to fill a quick survey after this webinar. Thank you very much for today's conversation, and have a wonderful day.